Hello, Sam Harris.
Hi, Helen. Thanks for the
Thank,
invitation. Great to talk to you.
thank you very much for joining us. One of the things that I, myself, and a lot of other people generally particularly admire about you is your ability to bring clarity to situations in which people seem to get inexplicably confused or bogged down.
Mm,
Now, one of the things that we are dealing with, primarily at Counterweight, is helping individuals to keep their organizations open to freedom of belief, freedom of speech, and viewpoint diversity. What we find in the endeavor to do this is that there are some people who are very confused about what freedom of speech actually is.
mm,
And this can be people on the critical social justice left and even people on the libertarian right who will tell us that cancel culture, people getting fired for wrong think, people declining to affirm beliefs that they don't have, isn't an issue of freedom of speech because it's not the government that's doing it to them.
right,
How
right.
how do you think we can get through to people that freedom of speech is more than that, that it's a principle, a culture that regards the free exchange of ideas and viewpoint diversity positively?
Yeah, well, it really is the foundation of our moral and intellectual lives, right? And we can differentiate laws and norms, right? It's true that, you're free to fire people who say things you don't like and that you don't want to be associated with, right? So and that's not a violation in the U.S. That's not a violation of their First Amendment rights because it's not a political or government infringement of their free speech. But I mean, more generally speaking, the when you look at just what we do as individuals and as a species to navigate in the space of all possible experiences together, the only way we have to correct course, the only way we have to um, notice our errors and correct for them uh, is to talk about everything, right? I mean, we have to exchange ideas. I mean, the software we have cognitively and behaviorally is always a matter of persuasion and criticism and error detection and complaint. And I mean, we have to be free to talk to one another and to not merely think things in private and remain terrified over expressing these things for the possible reputational damage we may incur. And so insofar as our environment, the environment we create with each other, society becomes stifling of free expression insofar as we're hemmed in on all sides by taboos and blasphemy tests and the persistent threat of excommunication and defenestration. Um, it's we get worse and worse at detecting our own errors and collaborating with one another. I mean, it's like there is nothing else. We have no other tools, right? We've got what we have is on the other side, when speech stops, we have force, we have coercion, we have the raw exercise of power. We have, do it or else, right? And other than that, we need to be able to persuade one another that certain ideas are better than others, that uh, I mean, and we're so bad. I mean, we've become so bad at noticing the principles that allow this to work well, right? So, like, we now apparently we have a generation of people who think that their capacity for outrage, their capacity to feel offended, is itself evidence for the rightness or wrongness of any given principle or idea or set of values, right? So it's like the ick factor is ruling our epistemology now, and it's getting so finely calibrated that now we have terms like microaggressions and speech is violence and just this reconception of harm that has made everyone as thin-skinned as they can possibly be, and as performative as they could possibly be. And as you know, social media is a massive variable here. I mean, people will be far more reasonable in private than they will be in front of a mob. Um, so we have to figure out how to pull the brakes on these recent developments and get back to some place where we recognize that grown-ups should be able to talk about more or less everything with a cool head and not endlessly castigate one another for merely thinking out loud, right? And this and no, this does not put us on a slippery slope where we will then be powerless to resist the Nazis who yet live among us, right? I mean, we can the arguments against Nazism are fairly clear at this point, right? And the reasons not to hire Nazis are just as clear as those arguments. And so, no, we don't. We're not powerless in the face of real evil if we expand the Overton window back to some reasonable scope and find ourselves willing to talk about things that make people uncomfortable.
I think this is borne out by what a lot of people who are coming to us are saying. One of the first things we realized when people were coming to us and saying they were afraid to speak, they were feeling intuitively that things were wrong. They had things they wanted to say, but they were afraid to express them, and they didn't even really know how to express them. The problem seemed to be so much that without the ability to speak, people were limited in their ability to think. So one of the things that Counterweight did was produced a peer support system in which people could just have a space where they could think through their thoughts, they could articulate their ideas, and the feedback that we've had from that is that that alone has given them a confidence and understanding of their own mindset and an ability to go forward and articulate their objections and negotiate with their employers. So they then come back to us and we can strategize with them about how to do this. My fear is that if we can't speak, we can't think, and this isn't affecting, as some people will say, just the privileged people. We hear from an awful lot of particularly Black Americans and particularly South Asian Brits who are finding that they are very much constrained to a certain way of thinking. They are obliged to believe in critical social justice approaches to anti-racism or on post-colonial ideas, and trying to speak outside this, they're finding that they now have less access to the marketplace of ideas than white people do, according to this ideology, which is meant to free the voices and experiences of people of marginalized races.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, one of the things that's so pernicious about this silencing effect is it creates an illusion of consensus where you have the most voluble and hysterical activists taking up all the oxygen and successfully cowing other people into silence, for fear of the reputational damage that awaits them if they open their big mouths on any number of topics, race being only one. And so you get this sense that, okay, everyone agrees that, this current paradigm of anti-racist social justice, perpetual activism is real and true and good, and we should all assent to it. But, it's probably the percentage of people who truly believe this stuff, it may well be in the single digits in any society. Right. And yet they have captured our institutions because they have an asymmetric advantage. It is so costly to be accused of being racist or sexist or transphobic at this moment that no one wants to risk it. And so no one will say the obvious and sensible things that run counter to this moral panic and this new species of dogmatism. I mean, here's the obvious thing on the point of race, right? Clearly the goal is to care less and less about the superficial differences between people, like skin color. I mean, what seems patently obvious to me is that skin color should become like hair color, right? I mean, no one cares about differences in hair color, right? No one is disposed to worry that there are not enough blondes working at, Google or Apple, or, I mean, it's just, how many blondes are working at Google and Apple, and do they perfectly represent their proportion in society? who knows and who cares, right? We want to get there with respect to every other superficial variable that you can ascribe to other human beings, right? We just don't care about eye color, hair color, height, you know, and we shouldn't care about skin color, right? And we can dimly see the end zone here, you know, awaiting us, where we can truly get to a post-racial future. And the people who deny that possibility in the white community are white supremacist assholes, right? Like, who we want nothing to do with, right? Now we have a very voluble subset of activists in elsewhere who are taking the other side of that argument, that asserting the primacy of race from the black and brown side of things. And many of these people are white, and think that they're helping out their beleaguered brothers and sisters in these race wars. It's just, I mean, I am not denying the history of racism in our societies and our need to overcome it. And where racism still exists, obviously, we want to criticize, notice it, criticize it, get rid of it, disincentivize it. But it exists in some places, but it doesn't exist everywhere. And it's being claimed to exist everywhere, and it's being found everywhere in what is clearly a mass hallucination. And it's this hallucination is being defended by people who now are highly incentivized to defend it. And the level of dishonesty and callousness that surrounds this whole enterprise is just, it's appalling, and genuinely good people who everyone knows are not racist or sexist or transphobic are being sacrificed to this new religion. We hear about a new case every day of some journalist or otherwise, some of these people are prominent. Some of these people you've never heard of and are never had any kind of public platform. But the lists of people who have had their reputation systematically destroyed over nothing is growing every day, and it should be unacceptable to everyone.
I agree. I agree. And what would you say to the people who are feeling intimidated, who are feeling silenced, and who are feeling that they just have no way to move forward on this?
Well, I think it's great that an organization like yours exists to guide people, because what we have here is a massive coordination problem, right? It's not, if everyone stepped forward together, this hysteria would be over overnight, right? Because then we would see our numbers, we would see how untenable it is to try to cancel everyone when everyone is really virtually everyone, right? It would be another, emperor's new clothes phenomenon, where it's just the spell would lift all at once because enough people would acknowledge the obvious. But for any private person who is siloed or thinks they're siloed in their organization, right, where they're the only person who they know who is thinking these thoughts because there's no one to talk to, or they're too scared to talk to anyone. It becomes rational, unfortunately, to keep your mouth shut, right? And to just go along and to be bullied into silence or into acquiescence or into some apparent complicity with this moral panic, right? Like then think of how you appear to everyone else. You appear like another one of the zombies who are true believers in this movement, right? And so it's, your silence is confirming somebody else's worst fears, that they're alone in thinking reasonably about what's going on here. So unfortunately, it is, all too rational in certain circumstances to hide, but it's increasingly untenable to do it. And and hopefully we can build the institutions that make it unnecessary. Right. I mean, I think ultimately, I think there will be lawsuits that go against the grain of this, where people successfully sue corporations for having created a hostile work environment over these issues. And if you've been brought in front of your colleagues and purged and had your reputation destroyed for your non-existent racism or sexism or transphobia, you have a claim against that organization, and those lawsuits, I'm confident, will begin to land, and people will begin to rethink this.
And until we can reach that time, I think we recommend to people, just sound out, even if it's very, very carefully, very, very tentatively, your work colleagues, and you will almost certainly find that some will come to you. There may be some verbal wordplay at first to make sure everybody's safe, but if you give the slightest indication that you are concerned about being the accusations of transphobia or racism or any other ism, people will come to you and they will be so relieved to know that you exist. We're at the point now where sometimes someone will message us and say, I'm the only person in my organization who thinks this way, and we're able to say, actually, you're not. We have two
Right.
more in your organization. Shall I
Yeah.
introduce you?
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And
Yeah.
that's the way I hope it will go. But thank you very much for sparing us some of your limited time, and for giving your support to Counterweight.
Yeah. Thank you for doing what you're doing, Helen. Yeah. Keep it up.